Happy Tuesday morning. I'm going to talk about white privilege today and some examples that I've seen recently and some personal examples that I've had over the years with law enforcement. And conceptually, you know, people get really bent out of shape. People who look like me get really bent out of shape when you bring up the phrase white privilege. And they say it doesn't exist, it's not a real thing. It's an absolute real thing. And you can look at the protests that we've seen over the course of this year, since Election Day, since Inauguration Day, and you compare the response to of law enforcement to the protests that we've seen that this year have been comprised, those protests have been comprised almost exclusively of white people. We haven't seen the militarized response on part of law enforcement. We haven't, that's certainly not the response that we saw in the summer of 2020 in response to the Black Lives Matter protests. And specifically, what I observed this past Saturday during the No Kings protest is that when I marched in the protest, my brother and I both marched together in the protest in San Francisco, I saw one motorcycle police officer about an hour before the protest was scheduled to start, and he was helping to direct traffic along the entire protest route from Dolores Park up Dolores Street to Market Street, down Market Street to Van Ness Street, Van Ness Avenue, up Van Ness, across Grove to Civic Center. Along that entire route, I did not see one single police officer at all. And the only other police officers that I saw that day were, after the march was over, there were a couple of motorcycle cops who were parked up against the Bill Graham Civic Auditorium looking at their phones. And you know, you compare these protests to the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020, the police response, the law enforcement response. I mean, I saw multiple videos, live streams of protests during the summer of 2020, where during the day police officers were mingling with protesters, taking photos with them, taking photos of them all like taking a knee. And then when we got close to dusk, those same officers would put their riot gear on and go to town and cause violence and cause injuries. And that's one observation. And that was quite obvious to me on this past Saturday. So what is white privilege? I mean, it can have a lot of different definitions in a lot of different contexts. But to me, it simply means that the color of my skin has never made my life more difficult. The color of my skin has never made specific instances or circumstances in my life more difficult or more dangerous. As well as there have been specific instances and circumstances in my life where I firmly believe that the color of my skin has worked to my benefit in a way that it would not happen for people who don't look like me. And you know, in 2020, I had been a gun owner when I lived in Ohio. I moved out here about 25 years ago. I hadn't owned any guns while I lived in San Francisco or California. In 2020, I decided it was time to get some firearms again. And two of the purchases that I made, I bought a very high-end, expensive AR-15 type rifle, and I bought a top-of-the-line optic to go on top of that. It's another version of a scope. I have a red dot optic where I look through that. There's a red dot. I put the red dot on the target that I'm shooting at the range, and it helps you hit your target. That type of firearm, I have the civilian version. It's a weapon that is issued to special forces in the United States military. It's a weapon that's commonly owned by law enforcement in the United States. and the optic that I purchased is also very commonly used by law enforcement in the United States. Each of those items came with a sticker, and I put those 2 stickers on the bottom lower left corner of the rear window on my car, advertising that I am a gun owner and these are 2 of the things that I own. Since doing that, I've been pulled over 3 or 4 times for, mainly for things like speeding on Highway 5, either going to or coming from Los Angeles. In 2 or 3 of those instances where I was very clearly speeding by a significant amount, the CHP troopers, it was the same thing each time. They would come up, I'd have my license, registration, proof of insurance ready. They'd take that information from me, and they'd be like, hey, I noticed your stickers. Do you have any firearms in your vehicle today? And I would always say, like, nope, today's not a range day. Nothing in the car. No request that I step out of the vehicle, no request to search my vehicle, no demand that I open up the back of my car for them to look. Then they would go run my information. They would come back. They would see that I don't have any warrants, haven't had any moving violations in a long time. We would have a pleasant conversation about firearms, and then they would give me a warning and I would leave. And that was that. I think those interactions would have gone dramatically differently if I was not a white man.
Did you also hear that part? I had to pause a little bit because that part hit me really hard. Hi family, I hope you do good today. Now, people often struggle with the term white privilege because they misunderstand what it means. They hear the word privilege and think someone is trying to say that all white people are rich or all white people have perfect lives, but that's not the point at all. And I'm glad that today's guest is actually breaking it down in a way that it's going to make even the people who used to misunderstand this term white privilege to understand it in a better way. And before you jump into conclusion, let me make one thing very clear. This video is not meant to create division or fuel hatred. It is strictly for educational purposes, to spark honest reflection and respectful conversation. And I appreciate the original creator whose words inspired this commentary. Anyway, guys, I will let you continue to watch and I will come back and speak more about it. Kindly like this video, subscribe also if you are coming across the channel for the very first time, and I always appreciate you so much.
There was one time that I was pulled over on my way home from the gun range, and I told the officer, I have 2 handguns in the back of my car, my ammo bags on the front seat. I'm coming home from the gun range. And again, didn't put his hand on his gun, didn't draw his weapon, didn't point his weapon at me, didn't demand that I get out of the vehicle, didn't demand that I open up the back of my car and show him the guns, which I offered to do. And again, I got a warning and was sent on my way. And he didn't call for backup. There was none of that kind of stuff. There was no escalation of any kind. I'm not licensed to carry a firearm in the state of California. I had 2 of them in my vehicle that day. I was transporting them in a manner that was consistent with California law, but the officer involved in that stop did nothing to escalate it. Now I want to talk about a young man named Philando Castile, a 32-year-old African-American man who was fatally shot during a traffic stop outside of St. Paul, Minnesota on July 6, 2016. He's 32 years old. He was with his girlfriend and her 4-year-old daughter. Officers pulled him over because he had a broken brake light. One of the officers had previously radioed that he was going to pull over this car. The 2 occupants just looked like people that were involved in a robbery. The driver looks like one of our suspects. When they pulled him over, he said, "Officer, I am carrying a handgun. I am licensed to carry a handgun." The officer, whose last name was Yanez, said, "Well, don't reach for it." He was like, "I'm not reaching for it." The officer said, "Don't pull it out." And Philando said, "I'm not pulling it out." And the officer said, "Don't pull it out," and then fired 7 shots at Philando Castile. He hit him 5 times, twice in the heart. His girlfriend said, "You just killed my boyfriend." She started live streaming on Facebook. Mr. Castile died of his injuries despite lawfully carrying a handgun and having a license or permit to do that, which he immediately informed the officers, the officer who came up to his window. The officer shot and killed him anyway. Even though he didn't reach for his gun, the officer never saw his gun, but Philando Castile was black. That officer was charged with second-degree manslaughter, 2 counts of dangerous discharge of a firearm, and he was acquitted by a jury following a jury trial. And so people who think that white privilege is not real, I would like you to watch this video. Some of the information here is anecdotal from my own personal experiences, obviously. But that's how those are some of the circumstances of how I have benefited from being a white man and a gun owner in the United States, even when interacting with law enforcement. That clearly those types of interactions would go on a different way if I was not a white man, and I firmly believe that.
Wow, I really like the way he ended that part. Now, like I was saying earlier, people misunderstand white privilege because they think it means every white person lives in luxury. But it's not about being rich. It's about being treated fairly without even asking for it. It's the freedom of walking through life without people suspecting you before they even know you. Some people call it luck, but I don't think so. It's luck if it consistently protects the same group while punishing another. I've actually seen this with my own eyes. Just last week, we were at the store and there was a black girl standing in the line ahead of us. The security stopped her and checked her bag, and I assumed they were doing it for everyone until I realized no one else was stopped, not even me. And I know for a fact that the only reason I walked past untouched was because I was standing next to a white person. For a moment, I tasted protection that was not even meant for me. That's what people don't understand. White privilege is not always about getting extra benefits. Sometimes it's simply not being treated like a threat everywhere you go. And every time this conversation comes up, there is always someone who says, well, what about black privilege? I didn't get a job because they hired black people instead of me. I even saw a comment like that in one of the videos that I was watching about white privilege recently. The person said, I deserved it more than them. And that right there is the real problem. Because he or she did not say, I was more qualified. Instead, the person said, I deserved it. And I was like, deserved? Like, feeling entitled to something isn't the same as being better for it. One white person not being chosen does not erase centuries of black people being overlooked, even when they were the most qualified in the room. Being denied once is not oppression. Being doubted every day is. Black people across the world share a silent understanding that you don't get the benefit of doubt. Like when you raise your voice, they call you aggressive. When you walk into a store, you're suspicious. When you try to defend yourself, you are labeled hostile. And even when you excel, they assume it was handed to you. And when you fail, that one they will say it's typical. Even children aren't spared. Like black students are suspended more frequently than white students for the same behavior. Like he was also talking about black drivers getting pulled over more often. And the worst of all, when a white person makes a mistake, it's only about them. But when a black person makes a mistake, it becomes a reflection of their entire race. And in one of the video, I actually thought him wise. I'm so sure you have heard of him. He's a very wise professor, always standing up for black people. He was actually openly admitting how many reckless things he did in his youth without facing consequences. And these are the proofs that we want. Like he said it himself, if I were black, I would be serving 30 years for the things I got away with. Just like this man was saying that his skin color like saved him so many times. So these confessions to me felt like they were trying to expose how white privilege and white supremacy has benefited palm colored people while punishing black folks. So I genuinely want to know, what do you think? Have you ever noticed how people are treated differently depending on who they stand next to or what they look like? Do you think privilege is measured by what you get or what you are quietly protected from? Let's talk in the comment section. And once again, I appreciate him for bringing up this amazing conversation, as well as making people understand and also confirming that white privilege is a real thing. So thank you so much for watching. Kindly follow our today's guest tea, and please like the video, share it, subscribe to the channel. Take care of yourself, and I will see you soon. Bye.